Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. Great to be with you, whether you're joining us on the radio and TV side, the podcast crew, or, of course, our excellent friends over on the live stream. We have quite a bit of news to dive into, including one piece of information that has been largely undercovered today. This would be the investigation by the Department of Justice via a grand jury into a multi-millionaire, almost a billionaire, Neville Roy Singham, over in China. So this particular individual, Neville Roy Singham, is alleged to have donated over $278 million donated into the American political system through a very, very incredible financial network. So if you're watching over here on the live stream, you can see a Fox News graphic that they created, which illustrates that essentially Neville Roy Singham, living over in China, and we're going to get to some of his insane babblings here in a minute, would donate hundreds of millions of dollars through a few separate organizations at first, who would then donate to a couple of different American super PACs, organizations, $167.5 million to the People's Support Foundation. It's a 501c3 nonprofit established with a hotel address in 2017 that no one is at. It's a hotel address. Nobody's there. And Singham's wife, Evans, is on the board. $68 million to the Justice and Education Fund, established with a UPS store address in 2018 in New York City, with self-avowed communists, including Manola de los Santos, on the board. $22.4 million to the People's Forum Incorporated. It's established in 2017 on West 37th Street in New York City, with, you guessed it, both Singham's wife, Evans, and De Los Santos on the board. You might be catching on to a theme here. $16.7 million to Tricontinental Limited, established in Northampton, Massachusetts in 2017 by a Singham friend and fellow Marxist ideologue, Vijay Prashad. And this Vijay Prashad individual comes up because he's often a part of Singham's insane babblings and rants. So again, this group will take, Neville Singham will directly donate, likely via the Chinese Communist Party. We're trying to investigate right now with the DOJ just how involved that is, to several different shell organizations, who then donate to a series of dozens of shell organizations, and then funnel that money into activist groups like CodePink, who tries to break the U.S. blockade into Cuba, delivering solar panels and possibly munitions to the Cuban regime. So who is this Neville Roy Singham guy? Well, he believes that the United States is using fascism to oppose communism because he says democracy doesn't exist. Here you go.
This fascist lie that the West says that there's a battle between fascism, democracy, and communism. They make a fake argument that there are three systems. I think Vijay has done a very good job of explaining that, in fact, fascism is actually a face of capitalism and imperialism.
Oh, yeah, that free market stuff, you know, when again, the fascists always move in and nationalize a bunch of industries and then take over huge swaths of the federal government. Yes, that free market capitalism of fascism, and then imperialism as well. The idea that setting up an empire is inherently like third wave fascist is always kind of bizarre. But anywho, we'll let him continue his ranting here.
As is colonialism. These are the three faces of a system that quite now is getting very, very dangerous for us.
Very, very dangerous for us, he says. Hassan Piker himself, the radical, again, promoter of terrorism here in the United States that the left has chosen as their podcast hero, this individual, Hassan Piker, is very open that all of the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, the Buddy Sanders funded Marxists, are just coming right from Singham himself. I mean, he is openly admitting that it's the Chinese directing all of these anti-American actions here in the United States.
I think that ultimately the target is probably Singham and his operation, from PSL to Answer Coalition to CodePink, like anything that he has ever financed. And it's not new. It's been around for a while, but it's obviously it's held through regardless because like it's ridiculous.
This particular infrastructure set up by Neville Roy Singham gets a little bit interesting Because the timeline right now shows that here in the United States, after the actions of the second Trump administration, there have been a number of particular actions kind of across the board that seem very sudden and erratic. When I mean sudden and erratic, I mean that as the Trump administration began a series of international foreign policy decisions, like boxing China out of the Panama Canal in the first year of his administration, in which China was attempting to open up ports at each end, or I should say on each side of the western end of the Panama Canal, therefore giving China the ability to cut off world trade. When China was attempting to broker a deal in Indonesia, was trying to broker a deal with Malaysia, and the United States sent Pete Hegseth over and brokered brand new diplomatic commitments between, and economic commitments, I should say, between those countries and the United States, it boxed China out of the region. The same with Venezuela, and this point is made by Stu Smith over at the Manhattan Institute. There is something going on right now in the United States with the Democratic Socialists of America, which is, at least so far as the data shows, appears to be directly connected to the China flailing on a global stage.
Yeah, so when it comes to Neville Roy Singham and the DSA, it's not going to be as crystal cut. You can definitely see a lot of people who have overlap with each other. There was a niece who was Singham's niece was working on the Mamdani campaign, but the thing that I would kind of focus on when it comes to DSA, Cuba, and this kind of broader New York base wing is that at the start of the year 2026, Maduro gets captured, and then all of a sudden you start seeing DSA signing on to answer coalition protests.
What the point that he is beginning to make here, and it's kind of a slow burn, this particular clip, is that you have the stage where the Trump administration is taking elements off of the diplomatic stage on the international side, the economic stage for China, things that they had, the Belt and Road Initiative, and also taking certain options off the table for some of the Islamic infrastructure in the Middle East, some with more success than others, and we're going to get to that. And the response appears to be, while China is quietly collapsing in on itself inside continental China, what you're seeing kind of here on the homeland in the United States is all of these Neville Singham adjacent and funded apparati, different parts of the infrastructure that Neville Singham has set up politically, appears to be getting more motivated, more violent, and all of the masks are coming directly off. And it's open advocacy for canceling the blockade on Cuba, or Cuba's going to fall, just like we see Venezuela doing. I mean, that's directly Hassan Piker asking a primary candidate in Colorado who is going up for her primary election tomorrow, in her list of things that's important to her as a congresswoman from Colorado, ending the blockade to Cuba. And of course, she says yes. Regarding China panicking, because they are absolutely panicking. I'm not going to say that I told you so, but on Friday's show, so what I love right at the beginning is that it all comes back to the real reason for Iran losing their ever-loving minds. Iran, like China, has been cut out of the Middle East and the world. And as they are being cut out of the Middle East and the world, those who were counting on China manipulating the world through the Belt and Road Initiative, and those who were counting on Iran being able to threaten, cajole, kill, steal, rape, plunder, murder, etc., are now frustrated. And so they're openly admitting that any and all actions of Iran are only to try to desperately maintain their hold. Now, here's where things get more interesting, I should say, because, obviously everyone enjoys, taking a little bit of a victory lap and saying, hey, this is exactly what I was saying just a little bit ago. Now, if China is truly panicking, and all of the kind of apparatus are coming alive at the exact same time, they're getting all of the momentum out there in the primary season, there's a bit of a problem. Because on the flip side of this is a general population and even a lot of individuals inside the Democratic Party who don't seem to be ready to make this shift at all. Now, of course, there are some opportunists who, may or may not be, as this certain Politico article points out, may or may not be taking a little bit of funding, or at least coordinating operations with Neville Singham-backed groups like Chris Murphy, his newly rebranded Political Action Committee, American Mobilization. He donated $100,000 last year to Indivisible. Now, that is a particular PAC that works very, very closely with Neville Singham's group. Very interesting how this kind of circular funding apparatus gets going. Here's Chris Murphy at the same time, when all of these other Democrats are saying, we really don't want a lot of the hyper-communists and the Marxists and the terrorists, the Islamists, I should say. Chris Murphy is coming forward with, well, it's just a big tent party. Everything's fine. We just need to get together and share a lot of money back and forth.
Let's first off start with your reaction to the latest primary results out of New York. You've heard President Trump say that these candidates aren't socialists. He's gone as far as to call them communists. As someone who identifies as a progressive, is this a moment of reckoning for establishment Democrats?
Oh, I think you're going to have different candidates being nominated in New York City and suburban Connecticut. This is a party that is also nominated and won with candidates like Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill. I want us to be a big tent party. I mean, I've been saying this for years. I think that it's actually a sign of a party that is alive and growing when there's a contest of ideas inside the party. So I'm not a Democratic socialist, but I do believe that the Democratic Party has been historically way too timid in taking on corporate power. I think our party should have bigger ideas. I put one on the table last week, a $25 minimum wage. And I think we do have to have answers for the way in which corporations and billionaires are taking over and corrupting our politics. So I do think that there is somewhat of a trend that candidates who are confronting concentrated corporate power in a meaningful way are winning.
Total word salad. Total word salad, just to suggest that the ultimate plan here, the big move for the party, for the entire party, is to go all in on essentially cutting off any criticism while moving all in on big tent stuff, which just means funneling as much money into the DSA from individuals like Neville Roy Singham. Now, again, this is a grand jury investigation, which means that it is very likely right here and right now, things are about to get rather spicy. This is a calm before the storm moment. And that brings us over to kind of the infighting of the DNC and then the Supreme Court stuff. Don't go anywhere. We have a lot more tonight on the Tony Kinnett Cast. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. We are going to dive into quite a bit on the infighting inside the Democratic Party, because this actually ends up framing the major Supreme Court decisions today. So first and foremost, the wild decision for Democrats in New York and California to set the tone of the party here before what is a pretty winnable midterm for them. By winnable midterm, I mean Republicans are on shaky footing in Congress because the Senate has passed a good amount of nothing. So Democrats have an opportunity here. Are they taking the opportunity? No, they're not taking the opportunity at all. And it's not even due to the conservative analysts like yours truly making the case that things aren't exactly going super duper. Over in Colorado, whose primary is tomorrow, Colorado Democrats are increasingly worried that a progressive wave similar to New York's could reshape tomorrow's primaries, with establishment candidates facing unexpectedly competitive races. And then that's, of course, an article according to the Politico crew. Now, why? Why actually should they be concerned here? Colorado, while a bluer state, does not vote as socialisty in the general election as New York City or in California, for instance. It doesn't. And so what you actually see are, for example, Milat Kiros, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, I don't care, making the case that, well, actually, Colorado's already socialist. So that's why you should vote openly Marxist, openly socialist, an absolute nutcase. Here you go.
Denver's not New York, but Denver actually rates socialism higher than we rate capitalism by 4 points. And, when I talk to voters about what we're doing and why I'm a democratic socialist, I remind them that we have socialism already, right? It's in the roads that we drive on. It's in the schools we send our kids to. It's in the fire stations we call upon. I'm just asking that we extend that security to our healthcare, to our housing, to our nutritional food.
we already have all of these other projects that a lot of people have issue with because the federal and state governments do a terrible job of running them. So what we need to do, she's saying in large, very flowery language, which you know that Americans despise academics kind of gatekeeping from them, by trying to use exuberant language of the superfluous, of the pedantry, and people hate that. What she's saying is, you don't like how the federal government is currently running these programs because they're awful at it. And so therefore, what she's saying is the federal government also needs to run all of these additional programs that some people happen to like currently being private. That's her only answer to some things being unaffordable for some people, is that the government needs to run it entirely. That is insane. That is like, wow, gee, I happen to have a hangnail and it hurts. I better cut off my entire arm.
To our higher education so that we're actually meeting the basic needs of everyday working families in this country.
There is no need. There is no need economically. This is also one of the things I'll talk to you about, economic needs. Well, I mean, families have economic needs, so we need to provide universal higher education. College degrees are in their lowest demand this century. The lowest demand for white-collar college degrees. What are the big, what are the massive, what are the incredibly large incentives and the demands for trade schools? Going to trade schools that there are already state incentives for that just so happen to be in red states, in free market states. So the argument that what you really need to do is pay a bunch of baristas to go get psychology degrees, that's not going to resonate.
So that we're not just getting by and surviving, so that we're actually thriving. And in the wealthiest, most powerful country on earth, we're not asking for much.
Oh, we're not asking for much. We're just asking for everything. Now, this isn't, again, why am I bringing up this individual? This is a young lady who believes just openly that the United States had it coming with 9/11. All of these individuals in the DSA, the Marxists, the open communists, they are very clear that they believe the United States is the ultimate evil on the world map, and that they had it coming when it came to 9/11 because we were really, really mean to Muslims. That's her entire argument.
Do you believe that the 9/11 terrorist attacks on America were the inevitable consequence of American foreign policy?
Inevitable in the sense that we destabilized a lot of the Middle East, that forced people to believe that another act of violence was the only response. And again, just like I said before, our responsibility is to getting rid of those conditions that lead to violence in the first place.
Well, actually, yes, they did deserve it. I'm just not going to say it in that flowery of language. And there's a little bit of irony to this because much like a lot of the other individuals who are coming to this country and then running for office, Milat was born in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, just weeks before her father was selected by the United States Diversity Visa Lottery. So she came to the United States, had a phenomenal upbringing, was given so many of the wonderful liberties and treasures of the United States just to grow up and attempt to overthrow it. And it's all of them. Again, it's Medicare for all. And if you stand against her on the Democrat side of the aisle, she's coming with the guillotine. Do not take my word for it. Here she is.
And we have to pass Medicare for all. We have to get that done in the next Democratic administration. That's how we MAGA-proof our future. That's how we guarantee that whatever sycophant fills Donald Trump's shoes in 2032 and tries to lay blame on all of our vulnerable communities for why the system is rigged, we can point to a piece of legislation that we passed that meaningfully helped working families. And the only way we get Medicare for all passed is by getting rid of the Democrats that are actively standing in that way.
By getting rid of the Democrats. And I mean, just like with Hakeem Jeffries chanting at the Mamdani event for his little socialists who won in New York. You're next, you're next, you're next. They're not quiet about it at all. And all that matters, of course, is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, who's never worked a job. I mean, he owns 2 houses and he's worth lots of money despite never doing anything but being in government and getting kicked out of a commune for being so worthless. The communists didn't even want them. Bernie Sanders, he says, you know who's really great? This young lady who came from Addis Ababa, she knew Prince Ali from Aladdin, and I like her. She's great. She looks kind of like AOC, and you know how much I love the AOC. Here's Bernie Sanders doing his endorsement.
My name is Milat Kuros. Denver is the 5th least affordable city in the country.
So why are you running for Congress? Denver is like the 5th least affordable city in the country. Then run for city government or state government. Something. Why are you running for Congress? if your focus is Denver, and this I hate, by the way, I hate this for a lot of individuals who are running. They're like, I'm going to represent you in DC. So the actions that your congressman or congresswoman takes to represent your district in Washington is not supposed to have some magical outsized influence for your specific district. They're supposed to represent your will upon the national stage, because the laws they are passing are not state laws. They are federal laws. If you want to play my state, my district, my game rules, give a crap about your state legislature, which we'll probably get into later.
It's also one of the youngest cities in the country. It's also one of the most progressive districts in the country. And, we have things like universal pre-K and term limits and publicly financed elections. But we have a lot of young families that are struggling with childcare.
Amazing. After all of those other things that you totally promised were going to fix it all, like universal pre-K. So as soon as your kid is 4, you can stick them in school somewhere. You can just plop them in. The state will take care of it. No problem. Probably 3.5 if you actually fudge the paperwork right in Colorado, which it's Colorado, so that's not hard. Are you telling me that didn't bring magical rainbow? You told me when you were trying to pass universal pre-K in Colorado. I remember. I covered the campaign. I wrote the articles on it for the Daily Signal as, at the time, the investigative columnist and kind of the primary education guy. Our Tyler O'Neill, who is from Colorado, the poor guy, covered this intensely. We knew all of the circus it's going to be so wonderful. I mean, you're just going to be able to stick your kid in there and it's all going to be paid for and it's going to be super duper. And it did nothing. It did nothing except cost more for everyone. Now, we're going to get into some of the polling here in just a second because they are going a little too quick, a little too soon. But we got to send the radio crew over to commercial in the meantime. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. Now, things aren't all rosy and wonderful over in Democrat land. Because, I talked about AOC and the Bernie Sanders. He's championing the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Well, it just so happens that old Bernie has to kind of stop talking about AOC so much. Why? Because AOC is now taking heat from her own party because AOC is not to the left enough. Here, again, Hassan Piker, the poster boy, little fat rich boy, Cuban revolutionaire, little parlor pink. He's out yelling now at AOC because she's not doing enough right now. She's not calling for as much revolution. She's too soft. AOC's, the C stands for Charmin, I guess. Here's Hassan Piker, morning AOC.
What is the response to people like this? I do fear woke 1.0 type perfectionism coming to the socialist movement. Do these people exist in real life? What is this? AOC's backing Jeffries for speaker. She's as vile as Harris. I don't agree that she's as vile as Harris. I think that's crazy. But I do think that she is far more careful than what this moment requires. That's what I think.
Far too careful. See, if you don't call for insane, violent revolution, and by the way, what's the clip that he's reacting to? Just that AOC is suggesting, man, this doesn't really look good for the general for us to be having a full-on war within the party over our House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries.
For me, and we have a broad caucus, right? For me, I have made very clear that one of my priorities in determining and in a leader determination is securing public housing financing for New York City. And Leader Jeffries has made his prioritization for the residents of public housing very clear. And for that reason, I will be supporting Hakeem Jeffries for leader.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Because the alternative, by the way, is Ro Khanna, who is just cuckoo clock nutcase insane. So the DSA, they're going all in with this into the midterm. Oh, it's so exciting. And the media is desperately trying to carry water for them. So, for example, John Carl over at ABC, he trots up and tries to give Mamdani a little bit of leeway, like, well, you're not really anti-prison, right? You're just a normal guy that Americans can vote for, right? All of the candidates that paint themselves as Mamdani 2.0 that you claim to be your little disciples. So here's John Carl desperately trying to get Mamdani to appear normal to those in the middle of the country, where a lot of these elections are going to be taking place. Michigan, Colorado, West Virginia, Ohio.
But how does abolishing prisons or having open borders fit into that? I mean, do you see how those are ideas that a lot of your Democrats that are warning about what happened here say are toxic. Most of America won't go along with it. Are bad ideas. They're dangerous ideas.
I think what the focus of her race was, what the focus of her candidacy was about the struggle that working people are facing. And I think that we can have disagreements on policy positions. What we have to agree on is what are we fighting for and who are we fighting for? She showed that in her race, and I think that many people will come to appreciate that in her leadership to come.
So we can disagree on something as basic as whether or not there should be prisons?
That's
not your position.
There are prisons,
yes.
And what we're also showing in this city is that safety is not...
Oh, there are prisons. Oh, he tries to sidestep it. And again, why is this a great question? Because the best part to this next election is going to be that many people, especially on the right side of the aisle, have kept receipts. So here's Mom Donnie going, well, why do we even have prisons? Why?
Are prisons obsolete?
Whew, coming through with the quotes, coming through with the titles of the books. I have to read that, actually. I haven't read that as yet. But I think that, frankly, what purpose do they serve?
Right.
I think we have to ask ourselves that.
What purpose do they serve? Says Mom Donnie regarding prisons. Well, what do they do? Radio crew, welcome back from that commercial break. Glad to have you because we've got far more to talk about. Now, again, there's some other media glad-handing and kind of soft stuffery. The media believes that because the youths are all in on it, they think that because the youths are here, that this is what they have to do. So there was this really stupid idea. And there are people on the right, and I don't just mean the way far populist right. I mean on like the establishment right has done this too. And even some of the groups and companies and organizations that I'm quite friendly with, there is this ridiculous notion that if you're a political entity, you need to be focused on what all of the college-age kids through the young adults think about things. That's what you need to do. So if they're on TikTok, you go to TikTok. If they're on Instagram, you go to Instagram. You be an influencer because that's where kids are going. And if we just put up brand new hit people, and if it's on the right, it's, wow, brand new show. They're owning the libs on TikTok. Wow, everyone's going to click on it. It's going to be so cool. Is it still 2016, right? Oh, man. Nope. No, it's not. And the left does the same thing. So the left thinks that because the youth thought Donald Trump was cool. Donald Trump, I'm really popular with the youths, the kids, the Gen Z, drinking their Go-Gurt from a tube. That somehow, if they just made Kamala Harris brat girl summer, that she would just waltz through the election, girly. And it turned out that the last time Taylor Swift tried to get a bunch of people to register to vote and then vote, it did jack squat. And so then Kamala Harris tried that approach again and brought Taylor Swift out to peddle her. And she went on a podcast and talked about her menstrual cycle to all the hip young girly pops. And it turned out it did nothing. And here we are again in the first year of the Trump administration. When they tried to just only do the online memery, it wasn't really popular with a lot of American people because grown adults, grown A adults, are who care enough to consistently come out and vote. Grown adults are and should be your market. You'll notice this show, though I be 31 years old, I don't try to pander to all of the young, cool, hip happening youths. Sure, a lot of my references and my jokes often reference a little bit of some of my upbringing that some of you may not have enjoyed in the prime of when you watched a lot of entertainment all the time. But other than that, I'm focusing on the general adults of this country. Why? Because that's who goes out to vote. And we're learning it now with the left. The youths are going to come out and they're going to vote. Oh man, we got to go all in on the youths. Hey, Mom Donnie, I can't help but notice you're about to be 35. Are we going to overturn this constitutional amendment and run for president and stuff? Jonathan Karl cannot help himself from wetting his pants in glee as though this matters whatsoever. Here you go.
Okay, so we're just about out of time. I got to ask you, I noticed that you're turning 35 soon, right?
In a few months, yes.
So you now hit one of the constitutional requirements to run for president. But there's another one that says you have to be a natural-born citizen. You were not born here.
Yes.
But do you think that's something that should be changed in the Constitution? It would take an amendment, but do you think that we should change that?
No.
No.
I think the Constitution looks good the way it is.
By the way, Mom Donnie's answer here, believe it or not, is pretty accurate, and it's a decent one. It is. It's no, I'm going to keep focusing on my city. He's very smooth and smarmy, by the way, when it comes to that kind of stuff. Very, very, very smooth and smarmy. However, once we get to the actual rest of the DNC, because this all matters when you get to the end of the second quarter, I've said for weeks and months, that is when I will decide the direction of the midterms here and which side looks more likely not to screw it up at the finish line. So now you have two kinds of candidates that are running in the middle of the country. Again, you can talk about the socialists in New York, and yeah, they're going to win their elections. Absolutely they are. But in the rest of the country, you have Utah Democrats, which elected in their primary a very milquetoast, sort of pro-life, kind of 90s Bill Clinton-esque kind of Democrat. And then in Colorado, you have them suggesting they're going to do the socialist trend. And there are Democrats who can actually put, believe it or not, occasionally 2 and 2 together that are kind of panicking on this. So former Democrat Joe Manchin, again, used to be the senator of West Virginia.
Let me just tell you that 47% of the people identify themselves as independents. They have to take, and all of you on your shows talk about independence, because independence is where you win or lose elections.
But 62% of Democrats say they prefer socialism over capitalism.
If they do, then by God, there's not a Democratic Party left.
If they do, quote, then by God, there's not a Democrat Party left. And then, of course, you have John Fetterman, who is very popular among the kind of Democrat and independent voters in Pennsylvania. The rest of the country despises him on the Democrat side of the aisle. Fetterman's trying the same, this time criticizing Mamdani for just openly flouting the Constitution and the president's authority on temporary protected status, and just opening up sanctuary cities for whatever. For illegal immigrants, for those who have overstayed visas, for those who don't have protected status, for murderers, for rapists, for whatever. Here you go, Fetterman on Mamdani.
Senator Fetterman, I've not heard that before. An elected official saying that they are never going to accept a Supreme Court ruling. That's Mamdani.
Well, I mean, people might remember just in the spring of 2025, now there were a lot of people that were convinced that we were in the middle of a constitution crisis. And I described to the media and other people, it's like, well, actually what a real constitutional crisis is then if the president defies a court ruling, whether a court or definitely the Supreme Court, then that by definition, that would be a constitutional crisis. And I said, we've not seen one, and I honestly don't expect one.
Because the Trump administration knows that as long as it follows the court decisions, even if they're wacko, even if they're crazy, and just says Congress could solve this, then the Trump administration comes away looking a lot better. They do. Even if you or I may wish the Trump administration ignored some federal judges. It is a political tactic that so far, and I think I see Susie Wiles in a lot of this, the White House chief of staff. I think she is a political mastermind, because now that hasn't been able to be used. Now you have Democrat senators and representatives and mayors and governors who are flouting court orders. There's your constitutional crisis. Now, it's not really a crisis because governors and especially city mayors, they don't have the same kind of constitutional standing that the president of the United States has against the Supreme Court and against Congress. Like, there's no fourth branch that's mayors. That's not a thing. But anyway, here's Fetterman.
And as far as I know, the Trump administration has not defied any of those court rulings, if you can correct if that's right. And now there was a meltdown, and a lot of the left media was angry at me for just describing those circumstances, but I haven't seen the freak out now that the mayor of New York is now saying, I'm going to defy the Supreme Court ruling. And many of the members in my party are not calling him out and saying, or defend him, or just say, yay, we really actually have to follow the court rulings, because unless that's a constitutional crisis, when you have the leader of the country's largest city, then we're not going to follow or honor what
Mamdani,
the Supreme Court says.
There you go. So it really is a fascinating split down the party. Now, I do really want to dive in and show you some of the polling number because I'm a big freaking nerd. And I'd also love to show you Abdul El Sayed, the candidate to hopefully by August 4th, that's Michigan's primary, nice and late there, saying that he really wants to get out there and be the guy who's dangerous if you're a healthcare CEO, dog whistling, not exactly quiet. We do need to move on a little bit. We might come back to some of that stuff later and talk Supreme Court shenanigans, because there was a big amount of news today from the Supreme Court of the United States. There was some good, there was some bad, and some ugly. We're going to get into some of that right here. So first of all, the good. There was a major case, Trump versus Slaughter. Now, this involves something that you've never really cared about, maybe you've never even wanted to hear, called Humphrey's Executor. Essentially, Humphrey's Executor was this magical provision that's been in precedent for a very long time that said the President of the United States and the executive agencies, the USDA, the FBI, the CIA, the FCC, the IRS, the 3-letter and 4-letter agencies that we all know and hate, right? The president can hire people to work for them because they're executive agencies. They are under the executive branch of government. He can hire people, but he can't fire people from them if they're not explicitly political appointees. Meaning this, let's say that the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, let's say, which is under the Department of Commerce because of that used to be under trade. So the NOAA, they hire me as a young meteorological scientist and a climatologist, and I go to work for the NOAA, and let's say around the second Trump administration that I've been working there for 10, 15, 20 years, start noticing that, man, some of the climate data doesn't look so climate changey. And then I just go ahead and tell up the chain all the way up to Howard Lutnick, well, I'm not going to release the data because I don't like that it just so happens to suggest that maybe this one problem we thought there was with climate change in the Atlantic Ocean is disappearing. Now, am I making up this example? Nope. There is an individual inside the NOAA who refused to release any climatology information out of the Atlantic Ocean and out of the Caribbean and the Gulf of America because it wasn't suggesting the end is here. And under the Humphrey's Executor, like the Humphrey's Executor precedent, you couldn't fire me because why? Well, I wasn't a political appointee. I was hired. I went through ZipRecruiter or whatever, and some HR department stuck me there. And so now I can just be there forever. It was a major, major win today, of course, along the ideological 6-3 lines. Roberts joined by Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett and Full. Thomas joined in every part except one. Gorsuch also wrote a little something. The dissent was written by Sotomayor, and it is, it's bonkers. We're going to get into it here at Radio Crew. We're going to see you guys on the other side of your commercial break. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. So, stepping back in time, Trump fired the Federal Trade Commissioner, Rebecca Slaughter, a Democrat, without cause in March of 2025. Said, you're gone, you're fired, gets another episode of The Apprentice later. And so Rebecca Slaughter sued, citing the 1935 Humphrey's Executor precedent, which held that Congress could magically protect multi-member independent agency officials from at-will removal. Which just means this, if Congress has given a certain amount of money to the Department of Education, and then they hire some teacher who's awful, or some administrator who's awful, then the Trump administration can't just fire them for being awful. Just saying, I don't like, you're clearly politicizing your position, you're not doing a number of things that are the priority of the administration, maybe you're doing malicious compliance, whatever. And so instead of the executive, the chief executive, being allowed to fire people in the executive, the Franklin Delano Roosevelt from hell precedent said the president can't do it. So Roberts wrote, quote, if anything more is left of Humphreys, we overrule it. That is perhaps the most useful thing Chief Justice John Roberts has ever actually wrote in the United States Supreme Court in any decision. Anything more that's left of Humphreys, we overrule it. Humphreys has for decades been a result in search of a rationale. That phrase is going to come back to haunt, the media airwaves here in just a little bit. He says, neither Congress nor the courts may saddle the president with those with whom he cannot work. You can't hire someone and be like, well, for DEI reasons, Mr. President, you're stuck with this absolutely insufferable individual forever. That's not a thing. Now, in the same day, what's kind of funny is that Trump versus Cook, Roberts wrote with a 5-4 majority that the Trump administration couldn't remove Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook while litigation continues. So he suggested that the Federal Reserve occupies a totally constitutionally distinct historical position, meaning the Federal Reserve is like way different, the first and second banks of the United States. The problem is it doesn't work like that. That may be really nice, and we all may pretend after listening to the Alexander Hamilton, Lin-Manuel Miranda soundtrack that, oh, well, I mean, it's very, very, very important that we, sit here and giggle over all of this nonsense because the Federal Reserve is super duper separate. No, it's not. In the law, the Federal Reserve is not separate and distinct in any way, shape, or form than any other branch of the administrative state. It's just not. According to the law, according to the precedent until today. Now, Sonia Sotomayor got really, really angry that the president could fire unelected members of the executive and suggested that this is a power unknown even to the English crown against which the founders revolted. If you would have told George Washington, the first president of the United States, John Adams, the second president, Thomas Jefferson, the third, that there were special executive agency individuals that they could not fire and Congress really could not remove, they just got to be there forever, they probably would have hanged you like George Washington hanged traitors in New York City. That's ridiculous. And by the way, what evidence do I have of this? All the way back through the Abe Lincoln administrations, some of the only foreign policy documents that we have that aren't Civil War related is how much scorn the United States had in the pre-Civil War era, in the Civil War era, and in the Reconstruction era for Prussia's administrative state. Essentially, it's Germany and the Prussians that Woodrow Wilson would be so later enamored with in the early 1900s, just creating a bunch of technocrats where I have a doctorate next to my name, therefore I'm always right, which is retarded. And that's not how that works. But alas, I digress. The radio crew is going to be coming back. We got to bring him in. We're going to get into some more of the SCOTUS stuff. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
The Supreme Court shenanigans. The President of the United States can now get rid of a huge number of federal employees because you don't have a right to work on the taxpayer's dime, especially if I'm here 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So as a side piece and a kind of a local example, because we're about to lose the primary radio audience that I broadcast to in Indianapolis. When I worked at Indianapolis Public Schools, a lot of the co-administrators that I worked with, I was the science director. We had kind of different terminology for it, but I was in charge of science, and there were those that were in charge of English and math and history and so forth. The greatest job that you could get would be to be hired by the Indiana Department of Education, because if you were hired by the Indiana Department of Education, you were set for life, because that's not an appointed position by the Secretary of Education. No, that was, actually brought through by the Department of Education. You just got to sit there making lots of state money forever. Nothing could touch you. You could just eat ding-dongs and Twinkies all day and be absolutely useless until you run for senator of Vermont and then try to lead a DSA uprising. So over on the media side, they are panicking that the Trump administration now has the clear runway to fire certain federal bureaucrats who have, again, were not elected, were appointed, and weren't even appointed. They were hired by individuals who are appointees to that department. And here, well, the MS Now panic is enough to show you exactly why there's just pearl clutching galore.
Well, I completely agree with Lisa that this is a sky is falling moment, because we have now seen the Supreme Court enshrine the unitary executive theory, overturn Humphrey's executor, and I think perhaps destroy the deep state, as Donald Trump calls it, which...
Yeah, I mean, destroying the deep state is good. First of all, you do not have a right to sit on the federal taxpayer dime because you have magical letters after your name. I have 2 Masters of Education degrees. I could be more than Anthony Kinnett, M-A-E-D, apostrophe S, because it's 2 of them. That's dumb. No one likes that. That does not mean that the decisions you make are automatically going to be better. The technocratic theory of governance failed and failed quite a few times throughout the 20th century.
I call the professional civil service, and perhaps a return to what we saw before 1883 when Congress passed the Pendleton Act, a return to a spoil system where the president cleans house. We no longer have professional career experts in these positions.
Yeah, that career. We no longer have people who are there for 20, 30, 40, 50 years that are just living off the taxpayer dime. The American people elect a president to do stuff with the executive state, the administrative state, which I do truly despise. And then he gets to assign whoever. Oh, this is so terrible. It's horrible. Quick. I'm going to need another set of pearls. This is terrible. Here's the thing. If you do not want the president of the United States to wield tons of power, again, constitutionally, the administrative state was never supposed to be a thing. It was not at all. One of the reasons why, one of the very first massive fights, and this is actually a nod to Hamilton, is that Thomas Jefferson did not want there to be a massive administrative state that Congress really couldn't effectively touch as the Federal Reserve of the United States, the first bank of the US. Didn't want that to be a thing because then states and the federal government in the congressional, in the legislature, their rights are diminished. Their ability to effectuate the will of the people is diminished. If you're freaking out about this over on MS Now or for example, ABC, which we're going to get to here in a second, the answer is that Congress should just close or really roll back the power of these administrations. These administrative agencies, they shouldn't be able to just snap their fingers and have a massive rule that cripples a ton of the country, which the Supreme Court ruled in the ExxonMobil case. Massively important Supreme Court. Anyway, here's ABC News also losing their marbles.
What's the immediate impact of this decision allowing President Trump to fire employees of independent agencies purely for political reasons?
It's a sweeping decision, Diane, in a major overhaul of our government. Congress, since the 1930s, has created dozens of agencies, from the NTSB to the Federal Trade Commission, Federal Election Commission, Securities and Exchange Commission. They touch all aspects of American life, setting regulations, doing enforcement of those regulations, and they are helmed by Republicans and Democrats in many cases. They were designed to be...
I love that. Oh, they were helmed by Republicans and Democrats. It was all so fair and balanced. The IRS never specifically targeted conservative and pro-life nonprofits. It's not like the Department of Education sent out memos that begged the Department of Justice and the FBI to declare parents as threats who just showed up to school board meetings and said, please don't show our kids porn. It's not like the Federal Bureau of Investigation, again, with all of those career bureaucrats who just, so Republican and Democrat around, very, very independent, labeling entire swaths of the country like Catholics as domestic terrorists.
Independent, protected from presidential interference. But what Chief Justice John Roberts said today in this opinion is that the president does have the power under the Constitution to stick his fingers in there and design those agencies as he wants.
Yeah. I mean, stick his fingers in there. The president creates the agencies. Congress then ratifies the existence and funds the agencies, but they are executive agencies. There has to be a top boss. This idea that you can have administrations that don't actually have a chain of command is ridiculous. It's nonsensical. Oh no, the president is going to, the executive agencies are going to be able to be controlled by the executive. Oh no. The horror, the terror. So that brings us over to, so that was some of the good. There's kind of an interesting, also kind of good regarding the Fourth Amendment and saying that states can't just seek GPS data from various companies on your location because it violates the Fourth Amendment of the United States. They need a warrant for that. And there's some really interesting stuff because although that was also a 6-3 decision, the majority opinion was written by Elena Kagan, joined by Roberts, Sotomayor, Kavanaugh, and Ketanji Brown Jackson. Neil Gorsuch also concurred, but on different grounds. So he agreed, so it was a 6-3. The three who disagreed were Samuel Alito, joined by Clarence Thomas on part 1, and then Amy Coney Barrett on several other parts. This one's very contentious. So essentially, the Supreme Court ruled that after a 2019 Virginia bank robbery, police obtained a geofence warrant requiring Google to provide location data for every cell phone user within 150 meters of the credit union at the time of the crime, which included a church and a senior center nearby. The data led to Okello Chatry's conviction. Lower courts had ruled it wasn't a search under the Fourth Amendment because Chatry had voluntarily shared his location with Google. Now, you may note some problems there because while Chatry said, hey, I'll share my location with Google, he didn't suspect that would also be shared with the government. It's kind of an interesting case. Radio crew, we're going to send you guys out for the evening. The TV broadcast crew as well. We're going to continue tomorrow, same time. And right now, lots more show over on the live stream, youtube.com/Daily Signal. We'll see you there. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. All right, as we were saying. So in the ruling, Elena Kagan, again, who is academically literate, wrote, quote, "An individual has a reasonable expectation of privacy in records about his cell phone's location, and police intrude on that constitutionally protected interest when they demand the information, even though for only a limited time, from a third-party tech company." Meaning this, the police didn't have the authority to demand Google or Apple or whomever it may be give them the location data. Now, Google can voluntarily give that data. Apple can voluntarily give that data. If you choose to give it to them and it's in the TOS, the terms of service, yeah, they can do so. They can say, hey, we are going to work with all individuals here. Now, Gorsuch said that Chatry should have won, but on totally different rationale. He said he has a reasonable expectation of being private. It's a very textualist and originalist argument that's just, I mean, really, really in the weeds. So libertarians rejoice. You have one Supreme Court Justice, Neil Gorsuch, who is using like ye old sovereign citizen style language in determining cases. That's just a little fun extra piece there. Now, the big one that a lot of people are mad about today is all about the Watson versus the Republican National Committee. So this was the big, can the state of Mississippi count absentee ballots that were postmarked by election day, meaning, hey, I threw it in the the mail receptacle on election day, the post office or someone else stamped it and said, oh, this is election day. But if it gets there 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days later, do you still have to count that ballot? Aren't the races already called? What's going on? Well, this was a very, very contentious one. It was a 5-4 majority that said, yeah, Mississippi and other states are not banned by federal law in setting standards for counting ballots that are there by election day. And by there, I mean in the postal system. The majority opinion was written by Amy Coney Barrett, who we're going to get to in a second here. And that was joined by Justice Roberts, and then, of course, the trio, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson. The dissent was written by Samuel Alito, which this one gets a little spicy. And it was joined by Thomas and Gorsuch, and then Kavanaugh, he kind of stayed away from certain parts. So here's the background. Mississippi law permits absentee ballots, which are postmarked by election day, to be counted if received up to 5 business days afterwards. So for Mississippi, if the precincts, if the Secretary of State's office gets the ballots within 5 days of the election, 5 business days, I should say, and they're postmarked by the election, then you get to count the ballots. And the Republican National Committee sued, saying, hey, federal election day statutes require ballots to be received by election day, not merely postmarked. Barrett wrote that the federal law requires the electorate's choice to be made on election day, but federal statutes do not set a deadline for the ballot receipt, meaning that states are free to count ballots postmarked by election day, but received afterward. That's about 30 different states and commonwealths right now that currently have similar laws. Now, before we get to why I think this was a bad decision, it's not as big of a deal as a lot of people are suggesting it is. And the reason I say that is the main opinion. Again, Amy Coney Barrett, this is probably one of the most wishy-washy and mediocre decisions that she's ever written. My issue with Amy Coney Barrett here is not actually that Amy Coney Barrett kind of makes this mealy-mouthed decision. It's not. If she's saying, look, federal law doesn't currently ban this, the states are going to have to figure this out, or Congress is going to have to figure this out and pass a federal law, okay, inherently, just for that reasoning alone, I don't have an issue with it. The issue that I have is that Amy Coney Barrett doesn't follow this rule like any other time. So there are 2 ideas to conservatism, some of which I agree with and some that I really don't agree with. There's the principles-based approach, which is that my logic is going to be the same all the time. And then there's the more populist argument where you go, do you know what time it is? And I have a lot of friends and colleagues who will say the do you know kind of what time it is thing and change their rationale based on how the public is currently feeling about something. That is the definition of populism, rule by what is popular. So in this instance, the argument that Amy Coney Barrett is making isn't popular, but there are a lot of other times in the last couple of years that Amy Coney Barrett has ruled against things that are really in the public eye right now, or ruled in favor of things that are really in the public eye right now. But here, for whatever reason, all of a sudden, she kind of slams the brakes awkwardly. Now, again, Samuel Alito, the goat of the court, at least according to Molly Hemingway. Of course, Clarence Thomas is also excellent. We'll get to him in a second. But Samuel Alito argued that accepting late arriving ballots, quote, effectively postpones the date on which the electorate's choice is made. And federal law precludes that postponement, which means this. If you push this out way past and the federal government has already certified the election by a certain day, that creates a lot of problems, meaning federal law is preempt here. When the federal government certifies an election, says here, that's it, that day, no more ballots count. And you're saying that the federal government doesn't have the right to make that choice. That's Alito's argument. It's silly. However, his big warning here says, quote, and I think we actually have this up on B-roll, just in case you're that kind of guy or gal. He says, finally, today's decision leaves open opportunities for voter fraud that may further undermine Americans' faith in the integrity of this country's elections. The reason that Samuel Alito makes this point, that doing this undermines Americans' faith, this is precisely the argument that Amy Coney Barrett has made when it suits her on several other major decisions over the last couple of years, in which she cited against the Trump administration. So, for example, one of Amy Coney Barrett's arguments against the tariffs was that, well, if we allow the president to use these tariffs, then it's going to undermine Americans' trust in the economic system and in the power of Congress. That was one of her arguments that she made. All of a sudden, though, she's flipped. Now, it's a politically awkward thing. Trump called it a tremendous loss and immediately demanded that Congress passes the Save America Act, which, by the way, that does appear to be the softball kind of thing that even Amy Coney Barrett is kind of like tossing up to the Trump administration here. It's not as much a huge blow as a lot of people are suggesting. But I will kind of end on 2 points here before I get to criticizing Amy Coney Barrett as a Supreme Court justice. So Hakeem Jeffries, I love how many times we've gotten over the last couple of days that the Supreme Court of the United States is totally Trump town and they always side with him. And, oh man, they're always for Donald Trump, no matter what. Gee, boy, howdy. All of the sudden, I don't seem to hear all of those people saying that the Trump Supreme Court is doing his bidding. I didn't really hear him a whole lot today. Here was Hakeem Jeffries 2 months ago versus a tweet of his today.
Because this isn't even really the Roberts court. Mm-hmm. It's the Trump court.
Yes.
And what we would expect from the Trump court is an effort to continue their scheme to suppress the vote and rig the midterm elections and beyond.
Now that's interesting, because what I saw today was Justice John Roberts rule against the Trump administration in the Republican National Committee. Gee, that's so curious. And again, Hakeem's vote or little tweet today, Donald Trump's effort to rig the midterm elections was dealt a big blow by the Supreme Court. He's not calling it the Trump court there. Gee, boy, howdy, isn't that interesting? That comparison provided to us by Western Lensman. I really do love the lack of any kind of self-awareness. But alas, this does actually provide a pretty good shot in the arm to the Save America Act. Again, we'll come back to some of the Amy Coney Barrett stuff here in a couple of minutes. So that brings us to the Save America Act stuff. There really is quite a shot in the arm to it. Here's the President of the United States when being asked about this today.
What do you make of the Supreme Court ruling today in regards to the mail-in ballots, and what comes next for the SAVE Act after today's ruling?
Well, because of the mail-in ballot ruling, which was a little bit surprising, gives people more time to vote illegally, let's say. But the SAVE Act is even more important, and that's the right. You have to be a citizen of our country. Okay, you have to show you're a citizen of our country, called citizenship. Voter ID by photo voter ID, and no mail-in ballots unless you're in the military, disabled, you're ill, or you're away, or even on a vacation. We're being very open about it.
Now, the President of the United States has a point here, and it's not really a point that the Democrats were expecting. So the Democrats will tell you quite consistently that the American people are coming to demand certain services by the federal government because they can't afford things. Contrary, Americans are in fact seeing what used to be considered state issues or local issues as part of the national game. And one of the things that Americans, kind of an interesting offshoot of Americans viewing the entire government as just federal, And this is a huge reason that I think the 17th Amendment of the United States need to be tossed out. We might talk about that a little bit more today, maybe another day this week. But the American people, in viewing things as a national game, American people are going to want some standards across. Again, if Congress is a national ball game, which means that what Congress is going to do is directly going to affect me in Indiana, or you in Ohio, or Minnesota, or Florida, or Washington, D.C., or Maine, or California, etc. ad nauseum. I'm not going to list all of the states. This isn't exactly the Animaniacs. The Trump administration setting some standards here so that everything is impacted equally. And by equally, I mean there is a measure of equality in how these standards are set. That is becoming more popular to the American people. And Trump seems to be, at least this is the case he makes to a friend and colleague of mine, Mary Margaret Olohan at the Daily Wire, something that the Democrats might actually hop on board with. And in the middle of a major schism in the party, might not exactly be entirely off.
Yeah, what about Democrats, Mr. President? Are there any you think you could change their minds?
The Democrats should do it too. I mean, you'll probably get one Democrat who's, a common sense Democrat, who that is. And everybody should vote for this. This is the Save America Act. Voter ID with photo, ideally, but voter ID, proof of citizenship, and no mail-in ballots, which is, to my way of thinking, maybe the most important of all because it's so corrupt. But you have exceptions if you're away, exceptions for the military.
So then he goes into the mail-in ballot stuff. But there are a couple of things the president might make some inroads here. Now, do I think that we're going to see a ton of Senate flipped votes here? I don't. Now, tomorrow is another very, very, very big day. So the court has indicated that Tuesday, it's a big opinion day. Chief Justice Roberts has not announced it's going to be the final day. But there are some signals that tomorrow will be the big, honking, major, super-duper day. Now, I'm really going to skip some things first. The Trump versus Barbara, the birthright citizenship thing, Trump's not winning that case. I'm just going to set the stage for it, and they're not going to win the case because the Trump executive order denying birthright citizenship to the children of undocumented immigrants conflicting with the 14th Amendment, it's a marquee case of the term. It's not the right case to argue before the Supreme Court. And I don't care if this is unpopular, it's the truth. Should the 14th Amendment cover birthright citizenship for birthright tourism or illegal immigration? Absolutely not. Very and clearly not. Was this case supposed to be the actual case that's done? No. Don't look at me. The Supreme Court of the United States has already argued that with the Inspector General in the oral arguments. They're like, that's not really what we're arguing here. We're arguing something entirely different. It is an entirely different case, although it's being framed as like the be-all, end-all. So tomorrow, when you see the case like not actually passed, you see a lot of social media accounts, they're going to try to goad you into thinking, oh, it's a major backstabbing moment. Wasn't the case for it. Something entirely different is being argued here, and people are trying to suggest that this is going to be like the watershed moment of where, oh, the 14th Amendment is going to be decided. I very, very much doubt it. And if I know anything about the Supreme Court of the United States, I would almost put money on the Supreme Court saying, we're going to kick it to Congress, and right now it's fine, but if Congress ever wants to change it, Congress has to be explicit. Which telling Congress that it has to be explicit and detailed is, like telling Cher she has to sing without auto-tune. That's a hell of an ask. But, I still believe in life after love. So in this case, I'm just letting you know. Then there's a West Virginia versus BPJ and Little versus Hecox. That's transgender athletes in public schools. Can states bar trans girls from girls' sports? I think the state bans are going to be upheld, just so that you know. And then the National Republican Senatorial Committee versus the FEC. Campaign finance limits on party coordination with candidates. I think the Supreme Court is going to side with the National Republican Senatorial Committee, although that one's a little more up in the air. The oral arguments were weird. That was a weird series of oral arguments. The audio from that one was a strange one. Now, Justice Thomas, Clarence Thomas, the king, the pimp, the scholar, the legend, he's not given anything away, although he was approached and asked a few things today.
I guess so. Justice Thomas, can we ask who you were meeting with today?
What'd you say?
Can we ask who you were meeting with this afternoon?
What'd you say?
Who are you meeting with this
Oh,
afternoon?
nobody.
You aren't meeting with the speaker. You were in.
I love that. Who are you meeting with this afternoon? Oh, nobody. Not anybody.
Oh, God, no.
So what are you doing up here?
Oh, just walking.
I'm just walking.
No meetings in particular?
I'm going to tell you about.
Tomorrow's going to be a big day at the court, huh? Final day of decisions?
Oh, I guess so.
You want to give us a sneak peek of some of the decisions?
Nope.
But you can't tell us why you're up here today, who you're meeting with? Who are you meeting with, sir?
He's not giving anything away. He's not giving anything to anybody. Now, there is a great comment that I really do want to address real quick here. So, as to, the question as well, is it just that the lawyers for the 14th Amendment case argued it poorly? No, it's just the wrong case for it. I mean, it's really the cart before the horse. We'll get into this tomorrow after there's been all of the bleeding and the crying and the yelling. There should have been a totally different lawsuit brought up to cover the 14th Amendment of the United States, and it shouldn't have been this one. It shouldn't. But it's really hard to sue someone who, I don't really see a whole lot of cases where they'd have to find someone from, let's say, China, who is over here in the United States after they were born here due to birth tourism in California, for example. So, parents from China get over here, they have the baby here. There are services in China, often maybe associated with Neville Singham, full circle there for you, who have the baby here. And then immediately the baby goes back home after being born in the United States and then is raised in China. So they come back and they claim American citizenship and they act as an anchor, like we see with a lot of Central American, South American, and African American birther tourism. Or in China's case, it's used to completely supplant and act against the interests of the United States in corporate or IP espionage, whether it's through the university system. Shout out to Purdue University in Indiana for consistently being a disappointment on this. That kind of a thing. The reason I say the Purdue thing is that Indiana has one of the largest military contracting and development industries in the country. Like, Humvees are made here. I mean, crane and drone technology is such a big thing in the state of Indiana. It's where the biggest and most high advanced naval research laboratory is. Yeah, in Indiana. Yeah, kind of cool. And if you think that China hasn't been awkwardly pumping up certain numbers of students to go to Purdue University and then get jobs here, you're on meth. Much like those who decided that we needed to open the floodgates internationally to Chinese nationals and those who participated in birther tourism. So the 14th Amendment of the United States, that's just not getting decided tomorrow. Was it argued poorly? I mean, look, when something is really, really important, is it the time to do a big, huge flourish move and show off? No, it's not. I could take risks. For example, if I was really trying to impress you guys, sometimes we do alternative segments that are kind of interesting. Maybe I'll get down the piano and do a little dinner theater, or I'll cook up a steak or something. Is the election night of the midterms the right night for Tony Kinnett to try something bold and brand new and exciting with the cast? Or should we really stick to what everyone's coming here for? It would be the latter. The Trump administration arguing this case, I'm sorry, they took a moment that wasn't appropriate and they did it. And if the Supreme Court tomorrow gets really spicy and it's a 5-4 decision in which they really hammer down on the 14th Amendment, I do not know what to tell you. So we're going to kick it away to the commercial break very briefly. Oh, I forgot to talk about Amy Coney Barrett. Why does Amy Coney Barrett suck as a Supreme Court justice? So there are two answers, one that will upset some people and one that will upset other people. Notre Dame University's law school sucks. Notre Dame University's law school is awful. It produces mediocre lawyers. And the reason it produces Notre Dame's School of Theology, according from those I've talked to, their theology department is excellent for Catholics. Again, I'm not a Catholic. As far as the quality of Notre Dame Law School graduates, there are some excellent ones, but by and large, they are not good at it. They're not good. It's not a good school for law school. Again, I grew up huge Fighting Irish football fan. I like Notre Dame University. Its law school is way overblown, and that's because it's Catholic. Sorry. But a lot of people who graduate from Notre Dame Law School, they pull for each other in various law opportunities. That's one of the reasons that Amy Coney Barrett got onto this route of doing this certain thing. There is. The most mediocre lawyers in the Federalist Society often have Notre Dame Law School graduate degrees. Sorry, you don't like that? Tough. That's the truth. Number two, Amy Coney Barrett is a charismatic Catholic. Now, for those of us who are Protestants, charismatics for us often mean some stricter standards in a couple of things and very adherent to the word in some ways. For Catholics, it's kind of flipped. If you went up to a Protestant, especially an evangelical, and said, well, this person's very brilliant, they're a scholar of the Joel Osteen theologian camp, they would either laugh at you or hit you in the teeth, because Joel Osteen is a fake and a fraud and a phony, and he is about as good on the theology front. I don't actually have an analogy for how awful Joel Osteen is. I mean, dude's awful. I mean, just giving you urine and telling you it's beer. I mean, awful. The charismatic movement in the Catholic Church, the people of praise, which Amy Coney Barrett is one of, is like that to Catholics. To a lot of Catholics who are more traditionalist and conservative, Amy Coney Barrett is kind of like the woke Karen for Catholics. Again, and I say that as someone who desperately loves, in this time, a lot of my conservative Catholic brothers and sisters, higher Catholics, and very, very traditionalist, huge supporter of the Latin Mass and returning to traditional elements of the faith. And I say that as your KGV, Indie, Fundy Baptist, Bible-thumping boy. I am very much a fan of returning to the text and setting up great standards. The reason that Amy Coney Barrett is so consistently awful is that she doesn't believe that there should be a primacy of textual constitutional reason. She believes that it evolves over time and that tradition is more important than anything else. This is also where I have a lot of issues with the Wesleyan Church on the Protestant side of the aisle, who's like, tradition is just as important as the written word. No, it's not, Karen. That ain't the truth. Sorry. But I'm not going to make common cause with certain groups that sacrifice huge aspects of conservatism or of the faith and good, solid doctrine so that someone can feel momentarily really good on their insides. And that is why Amy Coney Barrett is a mediocre justice. She believes that the pulse of the culture really gets to define whether something is constitutional or not. And it doesn't come through always, but it definitely came through in her decision today. So, that said and aside, now that I have upset a good one half of the audience and one half of the other audience, I'm gonna shuffle on a little bit forward here to covering some of the other stuff. We're gonna switch to the commercial break reset. We're gonna cover the U.S. and Iran doing quite a hokey pokey. The mayor of Paris, just open attempts to sexually assault children in Seattle and in Los Angeles. And then a little bit more on the USDA fraud crackdown. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Lots more news tonight. Don't go anywhere.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
All right. We're going to get to a couple of kind of international stories. Before we get to the U.S. and Iran hokey pokey, I couldn't help but share this with you. The deputy mayor of Paris, Audrey Pulvar, has now stated that, again, they're going through the significant heat wave because the Europeans don't have air conditioning, kind of a problem, one might say. Well, she has, this lady has said that the United States bears a significant amount of responsibility for global warming and the recent heat wave in France. The Europeans are just doing quite well. Extra special and stupid as usual. Now, over to the Iranian hokey pokey, because I do want to cover this and not really spend all evening on it. So the Trump administration announced today that Iran was suddenly ready for, some kind of negotiation meeting because, again, there's been more fire exchanged over the weekend. There have been more strikes because, oh, gee, shocker, wow. It turns out that Vice President Vance's promise that the Iranians were turning over a new leaf and they're ready to negotiate. And there's some things you can't solve with bullets. And, oh, wow, this is gonna...
Nope.
Was that true?
Nope.
Did it work at all?
Nope.
Shocker. And so now there's a lot of activity as the United States repositions assets to not do any more silly ceasefires, I hope and pray, but to maybe finish the job. We'll find out. And so the president announced today that Iran is ready for some kind of a meeting. Now, immediately, the Iranians, came out and said Iran is not doing any delegation or meeting in Doha, Qatar. A lot of theater. Either way, you and I both know they're not actually going to give anything up. It's just going to be a stall maneuver. We've done this before. You've seen this one before. Anyway, here's the president today saying, well, maybe I'm interested. Maybe I'm not. Maybe it'll be good. Maybe it won't. Who knows?
Oil prices are way down. We hit $69 today. It was higher than that prior to the denuclearization of Iran fight that we have, which we're doing very well. There'll be a meeting on that tomorrow in Doha. And they're going to Qatar. I think they've already left, or they're just about getting ready to leave. So we'll see how that goes. But we're doing very well on that front. But the meeting in Doha is going to be perhaps important, perhaps not. We're going to find out.
From the President of the United States, true. Now, the U.S. is effectively moving a couple of assets now into the region. It seems like things are moving forward here. There is one other big thing that really should be noted here, and I see kind of over on the comments side of line there. As to J.D. Vance, you don't criticizing J.D. Vance. If you don't like him, just say it and be done with it. I do like J.D. Vance. I think that J.D. Vance, who I have a bobblehead of right there, is not just my doppelganger, but I think that he's really effective on domestic policy, and that the Vice President of the United States investigating fraud alongside of Dr. Oz, which we're going to talk about in a second here with the Assistant Secretary of Agriculture, investigating fraud, whether it's with the SNAP program or whether it's with government grants or whether it's with Medicare or Medicaid, excellent. Also his messaging on illegal immigration, excellent. Stellar stuff, love it. On international stuff though, given the individuals that he keeps in his council, not really useful. Not really helpful. And why do I say that things appear to be shifting just a little bit? Well, it just so happens that while Vance has been brought home, and now he is doing a little bit of a media run because the vice president is first and foremost the first elected press secretary. That's his job. That's the VP's job, is to be press secretary before the press secretary. That has been true for the entire history of these United States, these 250 years of our wonderful country. And Rubio is still over in the Middle East doing work. So that's really all I will say there, is that it appears those who get results seem to kind of be running a little bit more of that train now. We'll find out. Again, nothing set in stone yet. Now, on the USDA fraud crackdown, there have been a series of grants during the Biden administration in which individuals were given certain amounts of money, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, just for being a certain skin color. Because again, there was a lot of financial hardship during that time, and the USDA gave out Biden grants based on skin color. And so this administration's been doing a ton of work trying to get a lot of things moved, a lot of things kind of tackled in far of restoration, getting individuals what it is that they need based on merit and not based on skin color. To talk a little bit more about this, it's a pleasure to be joined by the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Mr. Devin Westill. Thank you for giving us a couple minutes of your time, sir.
I'm absolutely pleased to be here with you. Thank you.
So, obviously, cleaning up a mess after the previous administration, it takes a lot of different forms. There's a lot of different things that you have to attend to because the USDA does a ton. But how do you go about beginning to clean up the civil rights mess left behind when you have racially applied government assistance in the post-COVID era for recovering farmers?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to start by saying, these were real people, right? I wrote an op-ed recently that explained that Scott Wynn was one of these real people, a farmer from the great state of Florida, where I'm from, who just wanted to grow crops, just wanted to grow cattle. And because the pandemic crushed prices for beef, he needed some assistance, but he couldn't get it because he was white, exactly as you suggested. Luckily, he got the assistance he needed when the law was changed. But when we came into office, when President Trump came back to office, he moved at Trump speed to make sure that we were clearing away a lot of the debris that was discriminatory that had been left here from the whole of government equity agenda of the Biden years. And very happy to say that $200 million, for example, of grants that were just straight up discriminatory were removed by the secretary from the very first year under her leadership. Super happy about that. The secretary from the very beginning set out to make sure that everything that this department was doing was based in equal opportunity, merit first, and put out that those memoranda from the very beginning as well. And to enforce that, we put together what is really the first of its kind anywhere in the federal government, a merit-based opportunity commission to enforce these items as well. We are taking 12 months to go as deep as we possibly can in every one of the agencies that the department has to ensure that everything left over that is discriminatory at all is wiped away from USDA.
So this would be the time where I would say, come on, Secretary Westhill. Certainly one would think that there isn't that much when you dive into, the last couple of decades of decisions in these various departments that you would find that much debris, as you called it. And yet I'm seeing headline after headline after headline of all of these various investigations into certain grant programs. You talked about, of course, the 200 to 250 million, other various programs in the hundreds of millions to the billions, in which there are individuals receiving grant monies that should not be receiving grant monies, either just because, for example, they're not a citizen of the United States, or in the case that the grant was applied in a discriminatory fashion. So what are you expecting to find, if anything, in some of this stuff? What are some of the debris that you're looking for? And then what's the process that actually takes place once you discover something that's a little rotten under the floorboards?
Well, look, at the end of the day, I don't want to prejudge at all. What I do know,
right answer.
What I do know is that the last administration had, from day one, a whole of government, this is what they called it, a whole of government equity agenda. What that means is they want to ensure that the outcomes of any policy decisions are balanced on racial terms, balanced on sex terms, and these are protected characteristics under civil rights law. That gets it completely backward. What we want to ensure we're doing is creating a level playing field, right? Equal footing for everyone who approaches USDA either as an applicant, an employee, or one of our farmers, ranchers, the folks in rural America who rely on our programs, our food nutrition programs, for example, that they have a fair shake at participating in the programs that are available to citizens of this country. We put in place from day one, since I was confirmed last year, 4 different priorities. One is to combat unlawful discrimination. And that's where the Merit-Based Opportunity Commission definitely comes into play. But we also want to ensure that we're protecting women and children. Another priority is to ensure that we're defending religious freedom. And that we're placing Americans and America first in everything that we do. So when we are looking at these different policies from all over the department, again, not prejudging, but looking against that sort of backdrop. Do each one of these policies promote those priorities?
One of the things that I've heard, and as a former public education, teacher, I've heard this, quite a bit. This idea that if we take away all of those new and exciting equity measures for education, a lot of those equity measures that came about in the 90s and the early aughts, obviously, as you earlier emphasized and cited, some of the Biden administration USDA programs in which people are viewed based on equity instead of equality. The argument is you take away some of those equity opportunities, well, then it's going to go back to being the awful, evil days of insert whatever, horrible, stormy outlook that you could see here. I don't think there's really a whole lot of data for that on the education side, but what is it from the USDA side that you guys are seeing? Are you expecting Jim Crow to return to every farm? It's hard to keep up with the critiques. I'm paraphrasing a bit there.
Look, our position is the way to eliminate discrimination is to get rid of all of it, right? We do not make a farmer whole who has been harmed by illegal discrimination of the past by illegally discriminating against a farmer today. Mm-hmm. Our job is to ensure that we are leveling the playing field, ensuring everyone has equal footing to participate on merit and equal opportunity in all of our programs, notwithstanding what their skin is, right? Getting back to ensuring that merit and equal opportunity for absolutely everyone is the most important thing that's driving our decisions on who can participate and who can be employed, et cetera, at USDA. And I think it's an important time to be talking about that, which is why I put this op-ed out. Right. Today is what I like to call SFFA Day, Students for Fair Admissions Day. It's the 3-year anniversary of the Supreme Court's decision outlawing race discrimination in college admissions. I was a part of the constellation of lawyers that made sure that decision came down the way that it did, and thinking about how it affects all the other decisions that we make on this front as well across the United States. But also, it's a 250th anniversary of our country, the Declaration that said all men are created equal. We want to make sure that we're showing that we're really doing that here in the Trump administration and at USDA, and we're doing it vigorously.
Again, I was pleased to see one of the finest with the Center for Equal Opportunity be brought on to the administration. But, that's, again, like you said, that's more of an anniversary outlook back on things. Secretary Devin Westall, he's the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Can't thank you enough for your time and for giving us a little bit of context here on what the rest of the government is up to right before we hit the 250th.
It's a wonderful pleasure to do that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's right. Let's do a little bit of bonus tonus here before we kick you out for the evening. Just something special, just for you, here at the end. I don't think, just to be clear, look, there's a story from Los Angeles, arrested after shooting naked people in the street with a BB gun as they rode their bikes through downtown LA. Children are present. Seattle, naked people dancing around, and I mean just like nakedly in front of kids, like right in front of little kids. It's a mess. We'll probably cover more of that tomorrow. The story, not their discuss. I mean, we're going to censor those videos. We'll cover that tomorrow. I don't have enough time to cover all of that garbage this evening, so I'm not even going to try. I will say 2 very, very quick and fun things. So right now, we're currently looking for, as we get to the bigger fight in Colorado tomorrow, a little bit more on the interesting candidates that are running. I mean, the Democrats are literally running socialist mimes. I'm not joking. We'll get to some of that tomorrow as well. There is something from our Daily Signal crew, a documentary for America's 250th. I'm very, very excited for it. It's called Sacred Honor. And they have another trailer out. The documentary comes out on July 2nd. I'm really looking forward to it. So I did want to show it to you guys here real quick before we finished up for the evening.
We must all hang together, or most assuredly we shall all hang separately.
They knew that this would be regarded by the king and parliament as an act of treason.
So the people who signed that were basically saying we're revolting against the most powerful country in the world.
The Declaration of Independence reminds Americans who they are. Its words are ingrained in our memory. Its virtues are etched into our character. Its principles are impressed upon our destiny. Its signers carved out a new nation in the New World. For 250 years, the Declaration of Independence has inspired their descendants to defend their liberties.
Liberty doesn't want passed from one generation to the next through the bloodstream. It has to be fought for, defended, won with every generation.
But there's nothing more important for which we would give our lives.
But history has a way of making the unthinkable seem inevitable. But the Declaration of Independence was never inevitable. The Declaration of Independence is the culmination of one of the greatest political dramas in history. As ideas clash, as armies gather, as the fate of a continent hung in the balance.
I will say, because I know a lot of you have asked about, I'm reading that one book, Revolution, by Eric Metaxas, and you said, well, I would love to read it, but maybe I don't have the time to dive through and read that entire book. This documentary captures a lot of what is truly one of the greatest political, religious, societal, cultural, industrial, military dramas in all of human history. And the work that Tim Kennedy, Bradley Devlin, and their crews have put into it is phenomenal. And also, of course, you saw Victor Davis Hanson in there as well. A lot of great representatives and senators. Oh man, it's a good one.
The hopes of millions wanting independence rested with a small group of statesmen willing to risk everything they have, their lives, their fortune, and their sacred honor. This is the story behind America's Declaration of Independence. The story of how a declaration became a nation. Sacred Honor, presented by the Daily Signal, premiering on YouTube July 2nd, 2026.
Very, very, very good. Again, highly recommended. Excellent stuff. Now, if I'm not covering kind of the LGBTQ plus whatever pride garbage and other nonsense, what are we actually doing here at the very, 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 very end with the show? So there's one question that is probably going to be relevant now, and that's probably not going to be relevant again. This is from Steve over in the Discord with Chevron, and now Humphrey's executor tossed into the rubbish pile of history. What is the next foundational pillar of the technocrat deep state that we should go after? Federal judges would be the answer to that question. Federal judges is the answer. You say, but Tony, I thought you meant like the technocratic deep state, like the executive agencies. Shouldn't you want to shut down the IRS or shut down... I guess a lot of libertarians, they hate the intelligence agencies. I kind of think they're really sweet. They've just gotten sidetracked with a bunch of angry lesbian baristas. Like, Tony, shouldn't we cut some agencies? Sure. Would I love to see the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms thrown into the dustbin of history? You betcha. But what do I think needs to be the focus point now? All of these federal judges who are issuing, even though the Supreme Court of the United States ruled, you cannot issue nationwide injunctions. You can't. You can't do it. You still have federal judges who are doing so. There needs to be a better process for the federal judges to be removed. There needs to be a better process. It needs to be clearly articulated. And then after that, the immigration court system needs to be completely redone. Because in the Constitution and in the first 50 to 60 years of our nation's history post the Constitution's adoption and ratification, what you actually saw was an immigration system that didn't even have special magical courts of, well, why do you need to be here and why not? And what are all the arguments? No, that needs to be revisited immediately. And then after that, the 17th Amendment of the United States the United States Constitution needs to be thrown out. And I've heard some very interesting arguments as to why people don't want senators to be elected by their state legislatures, which essentially amounts to, but my state's full of rhinos in our state legislature, and they would send awful people and awful senators to DC. My short answer to that is correct. That's because your state doesn't care about its state legislature. And if your state had TPUSA on Indiana style like attention all the time, and your state legislatures were constantly beholden to those who were electing them all the ding dong damn time, then you would see totally different state legislatures and totally different state laws, and you would see totally different senators. Because if we looked at Georgia right now, and Georgia was sending 2 senators, neither of the 2 blue senators would currently be in DC. And also you'd be able to recall senators midterm. But again, that's another conversation for another day. We'll be back tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern, to cover some of the stuff I didn't have a chance to cover today. And all of this breaking news that's going to happen from today through Thursday. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, ticking down the time to our 250th anniversary. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care.